rain going to look like in that day? And so this is my task today, is to kind of give us a look at what that looks like. And actually, in my rush to put everything together, I may not have everything as I did save them. I can see already I don't have some slides. So we'll go through what I have. And we'll just go from there. Acts chapter 1, verse 1 through 6, restoration. The first account I made, O Theophilus, of all that Yeshua began both to do and to teach, until the day when he was taken up, after giving instructions through the set-apart Spirit to the emissaries whom he had chosen, to whom he also presented himself alive after his suffering by many infallible proofs, being seen by them for 40 days, speaking concerning the reign of Elohim, and meeting with them, he commanded them not to leave Jerusalem, but to wait for the promise of the Father, which you have heard from me, because Yochanan truly immersed in water, but you shall be immersed in the set-apart Spirit not many days from now. So when they had come together, they asked him, saying, Master, would you at this time restore the reins to Israel? Acts 1 through 6, and actually we're going to go through verse 11. And he said to them, it is not for you to know times or seasons which the Father has put in his own authority, but you shall receive power when the set-apart Spirit has come upon you. And you shall be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Yehuda and Shamaron, and to the ends, or to the end of the earth, as in distance and time. And having said this, while they were looking on, he was taken up, and a cloud hid him from their sight. And as they were gazing into the heavens, as he went up, see, two men stood by them dressed in white, who also said, Men of Galilee, King James, why do you stand looking up into the heaven? This same Yeshua who was taken up from you into the heaven shall come in the same way as you saw him go into the heaven. So right here, I have a couple of places that I'm going to be. Acts, and I pretty much concluded Acts. Told you I was going to be moving quickly. I will summarize this, and then we're going to go to another book, Isaiah, looking at the future as well. So, in looking at the millennial reign, the best place to get anything on what the future is going to look like is from Yeshua himself. And so the book of Acts is giving us a picture and a look at what the future is to look like. So we can go right away, we can go back 2,000 years, almost 2,000 years, to the time where Yeshua himself lived and walked the earth. So what is so important here, I have two cities that I want to bring out. The city of Judea, okay, Yehuda, and the city of Shemaron, or Samaria. Okay, giving you the King James names. Judea and Samaria, both as capitals from different times, where Samaria was the capital of a Palestinian area. And so Yeshua is speaking concerning both Judea. Why? Because it was current capital, and where Yehuda lived, the Jewish tribe, or the Hebrews that were left over from the enslavement. Now, these are the people who returned back to Jerusalem and lived during the time of Yeshua. Now, there was a mixed group. Let me just kind of interject that, because you had those who were Greek who were there as well, and you had other nations that were there by the time Yeshua was born. Why? Because the Romans, so remember, we're into the third rule. We had Babylon, we had Persia and the Medes, we had the Greeks. That's three. Now we're into the fourth reign, which is Rome. And so all of these different groups have infiltrated Jerusalem, Israel, where they occupied, ruled, and lived in those provinces. Samaria, very, very, very important, because it ties us to the old kingdom. And so this is why Yeshua make mention of Samaria as well. Okay? Why? Because Samaria, being a capital of another portion, we had a question that came up about those who are not Israel but of the nations. How do they fit into Israel? Well, here's another way of looking at that. Samaria, their time is before Israel in the land. And so they looked at Abraham as, Father Abraham. So it goes back to even Noah, who was the father of Shem. Shem, I like to identify as Melchizedek. So it should start seeming a little clearer now. This group of people were around since and after the flood. Not before the flood, but after the flood, after the nations were reestablished. Samaria was one of those cities, and it was a capital where Melchizedek and all of those who were during that time, the sons of Noah as they branched out. But Yehuda, Judea, we hear about that pretty often scripturally, and we know that they were there during the time of Yeshua. Now, the question that was asked in verse 6 through 8 was, are you, Yeshua, going to restore the reigns of Israel at this time? So now what we can consider is that Israel wasn't in charge. The council, all of that was under Roman rule, and they were under the occupying those who had dominant force of that time. And we just went through the 4 different kingdoms. All right, so let's look at Isaiah and where it reflects on us today. So what I'm doing is moving into, I wanted to bring us from behind to ahead. Now, here's something I want to prove that we're not there yet. We have not got to the new kingdom yet. All right? I know the scripture talks about Yeshua's death, and the renewed is really supposed to be covenant, or some read it in the King James as new covenant. But we are not there yet, and I'll prove that right here. Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2 and 3, looking at the third temple. And it shall be in the latter days that the mountain of the house of Yahweh is established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills. And all nations shall flow to it. And many peoples shall come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the Elohim of Yaakov, and let him teach us his ways. And let us walk in his paths. For out of Zion comes forth the Torah and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. And here's the problem with that at this time, is that you can argue that nations are flowing to the land of Israel. But I agree and will say that what we see now is man-made. It is put together by UN trying to fulfill the word of Yahweh and prophecy. So they get to say, see, look, we are Israel. We control Israel. Who is Israel? Revelation chapter 2, verse 9. Chapter 3, verse 9. In both places says, there are those who said that they are Israel and are not. That was true during the time of Yeshua's time, because it was Greek and Roman rule. You had fragments of Greek society that was prevalent during that time, but Rome had conquered Greece and become the dominant society of that time. So, continuing Isaiah 2, verse 3 through 5, and many people shall come and say, Come, and let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the Elohim of Yaakov, and let him teach us his ways, and let us walk in his paths. Notice paths. For out of Zion comes forth the Torah, the law, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. And he shall judge between the nations, and shall reprove many peoples, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither teach battle anymore. O house of Yaakov, come and let us walk in the light of Yahweh. Now, let's prove this out. Now, if we have reached the new covenant or renewed covenant, why aren't we at peace? According to this passage, according to Acts chapter 2, all nations shall flow to it. Previous slide. They shall say, Come, let us go up to the house of Yahweh, to the mountain of Yahweh, and the law shall flow from it, from Jerusalem, from Jerusalem. I think we can agree that that's not happening, because what we see now today is a fight that says we're no longer under the law. That's one. The next thing is there's no temple. And so this chapter 2 declares that there will be a temple built in the mountains of Jerusalem. And at this time, they are still trying to get this done. Matter of fact, at this time, they are trying to make that happen as late as just a few weeks back, where they have declared a new capital, or excuse me, a new embassy for the United States of America, and that is back into Jerusalem. And what they've done, here's two things. They coined a medallion or a coin to mark this momentous occasion that the United States have now called Jerusalem, which have not been done for the whole 70-year period that Israel have been back in the land, to call it Israel. Now, that's a whole nother conversation, who is Israel. But just know that the land has been reclaimed. And as I've said before, until Israel come, it will not be fulfilled. But Yahweh uses who he chooses when he chooses to. So, are they at peace? Not yet. Is there a new temple in the mountains of Israel? Not yet. But they're trying to get that done. They've made this coin. On one side is Cyprus image. The other side is President Donald Trump, his image. And right away, as Talmudim, you can already see a problem with that. Remember when he asked, go and get the taxes out the fish mouth, whose image is on the coin? And so we break the Torah, no images, neither of the heavens nor of the sea, right? So right there is a violation of Torah, putting an image on the coin representing the temple and Yahweh. And on that coin, they do have as the temple coin. All right? So the temple coin that they have coined as a memento, indicating that this is a coin to commemorate this time and the temple to be built. So, yes, they're trying to say now the temple is getting ready to be built. So, do we wait and see? Sure. Is that of man? Sure. I don't believe that it's going to be manifested until Yahweh, Yeshua, is here and ready to build. But that's another topic. Let's continue. Isaiah chapter 4, verse 2. In that day, the branch of Yahweh shall be splendid and esteemed, and the fruit of the earth shall be excellent and comely for the escaped ones. Now, let me just bring in a little more light with previous slide. It says previously that I will judge between the nations. He will also bring the house of Yaakov back into Jerusalem, right? So, it can be argued that those who are there now represent the land of Israel and the kingdom. And I beg to differ because there's no peace. And when Israel reclaims the land, when Israel, the house of Yaakov, is in the land, they will walk in a state of peace that is not before us now. Now, looking at chapter 4, verse 2, it says, in that day. So how do we distinguish man's authority from Yahweh's authority in that day? This is how it's going to look. The branch of Yahweh. Now, are we talking about a tree? No. But there are trees. The trees are men who look like trees of righteousness. As Talmudim, I know you're making those connections with that scripture. So, remember when the man who was blind, he began to wipe his eyes and he saw men looking as trees, right? twice, right? So truth is established. So here it says, in that day the branch of Yahweh shall be splendid. They shall look good. They shall actually look like stars from their brightness. And the esteem shall be splendid and esteemed. The esteem is going to come from Yahweh. Yahweh is going to reveal to the nations, he's going to say, this is Israel, my people. And the fruit of the earth shall be excellent and comely for the escaped ones. So the escaped ones and the branch are one and the same. So, the escaped ones, why do he call them escaped ones? Because they will escape a time of distress to end up into a place that have been prepared for them. Continuing, let's look at that house that will be redeemed. Obadiah chapter 1, verse 15 through 17. For the day of Yahweh is near upon all the nations. As you have done, it shall be done to you. Watch this. Your reward shall come back on your own head. For as you have drunk on the my set apart mountain, so do all the nations drink continually, and they shall drink and shall swallow, and they shall be as though they had never been. But on Mount Zion, or Zion, there shall be an escape, and they shall be set apart, and the house of Yaakov shall possess their possessions. So the house of Yaakov shall possess their possessions. So in order for that to be done, where shall it be done? In the mountains of Zion or Zion. The escaped ones from what? The time of distress. So what are we looking at? The millennial reign. And to suggest millennial, we're talking about 1,000 years of reign. And so that goes from a beginning point to an end point, not as in it's finished, but a time, and time is measured. So it's 1,000 years. So the 1,000-year will elapse and then go into eternity. That's what I'm saying to you. So when the 1,000 years has ended, in that day, when the end of the 1,000 years has happened, there shall be a twinkling of an eye, and they shall be changed. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And in that day, in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, they shall be changed from mortal to immortality. So we will go into a time of eternity, no longer to die. But because we are still within our first debt, we have 1,000 years that life could be had. Let me correct that. 999.99999, however you want to do it. But you can't do 1,000 years and beyond. So each of us will expire at their time, at their moment, and their time. Here's what you can do. You can increase your longevity from what we see as expectation now, which is about 70 years, with strength 80 years. And I'm quoting Psalms chapter 110, 110 verse 4, I believe that is. Somebody check it out, make sure I'm correct. But it talks about 70 with strength, 80 years. So, what are you saying, Rabbi? Once we have been cleansed, once we drink the water of Israel, I'm not talking about what's there now. I'm talking about we will be given access to what our parents, Adam and Eve, what our parents were cut off from in that day. Okay? We will be given access to it. But I'm not talking about after the 1,000 years are over. I'm talking about when our bodies are cleansed from what we live through now and what we eat and all the things that are destroying our bodies. When we are cleansed from that, when we meet Yeshua at the foot of the Mount of Olives, he will give us access and sprinkle clean water on us. And our life expectancy will be raised to unbelievable heights. I'm telling you, I can't wait. So, for the day of Yahweh is near upon all the nations. This is what makes the difference. We're talking about all of the nations now instead of just Jerusalem and those who are neighboring nations. But now he's talking about the whole world. And who will be gathered from the nations is Israel. And for 3,570 years as of this year, the whole kingdom have not been all together for a good long while. But that's getting ready to change in a very near future. And so it says, for as you have drunk on my set-apart mountain, that means there are some people who have taken the nation and the land. As you have drunk on my set-apart mountain, so do the nations drink continually. And as they shall drink and shall swallow it too, they shall be as though they had never been. But on Mount Zion there shall be an escape, and they shall be set apart. And the house of Yaakov shall possess their land. So there has to be someone who claims the land for this last part to be fulfilled. And the house of Yaakov shall possess their land. Two ways to look at it. It belonged to Jacob first. It was given to him. So it's Jacob's land and his descendants, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. A promise to be fulfilled. But then somebody else comes and takes the land and says it's our land. So Yahweh is going to bring back his people, and his people are going to take the land and possess their possession. I'll give you houses you didn't build, vineyards you didn't plant. Houses, vineyards. Let's continue. So now I want to look at even further Isaiah chapter 10, verse 20 through 23. And in that day, can you say, in that day? It shall be that the remnant of Israel and those who have what? Escaped of the house of Yaakov never again lean upon him who struck them, but shall lean upon Yahweh, the set-apart one of Israel, in truth, not a lie, in truth. A remnant shall return, the remnant of Yaakov, the mighty to to the mighty El. For though your people, O Israel, be as the sand of the sea, yet, and I want to use the word only, yet a remnant of them shall return, a decisive end, overflowing with righteousness. For the Master Yahweh of hosts is making a complete end, as decided, in the midst of all the earth. So in other words, Yahweh is bringing the nations, or the Goyim, the nations, to a complete end. The other end is the exilation, or the exiled Israel, that will come to a complete end also. How am I interpreting that? Because let's look at this. It says, O Israel, second bullet, be as the sand. For though your people, O Israel, be as the sand of the sea, yet a remnant of them shall return, a decisive end. So he's saying, this is going to be an end to their exile. They will be brought back to the land, and I will hide them there in that day. So that's what we're looking at. The millennial reign begins with in that day, from the moment he collects them from their place of exilation to when I place them back in the land as already decided. And give them the land that I said I would give to the seed of Abraham. And so, although you're going to be so many, you're going to be as the sand of the sea, but not all will come right back at once. So does that sound like Matthew chapter 25, where he says, and the kingdom of heaven shall be as 10 maidens, virgins, right? 5 are foolish, 5 are wise. Right here, it's already been decided. So what makes us interpret this as Israel going back to the land? Because it says, in that day a remnant shall return. But he also, going back to the first bullet, I'll just read it so it makes sense. And in that day it shall be that the remnant of Israel and those who escape, so that includes some other people, and those who escape. So let's go back and look at that. The remnant of Israel, comma, and those who escape, who have escaped of the house of Jacob, never again lean upon those who struck them, enslaved them, but lean upon Yahweh, the set apart one of Israel, in nothing but truth. So those who are there now, they say we're no longer under the law. Let's make this a place inclusive of all nations, and that's a done deal. Israel is back. We can have gay day parade and lead the nations, and we can be proud of it, defiling the land. No, Yahweh is talking about a people who will never again be defiled and have to be exiled. That's what we're talking about. So that's how the millennial reign is going to look in that day, a completed end. Chapter 11, Isaiah chapter 11, verse 1 through 5. And a rod shall come forth from the stump of Yeshai, Jesse, and a sprout from his roots shall be fruitful. The stump of Jesse, or Yeshai, the rod is Yeshua. So as I continue to read, listen. The Spirit of Yahweh shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding. Remember I said him. The Spirit of Yahweh shall rest upon him. So everything else, every time I give another description, we're talking about the pronoun him, and the name is not there, but the Spirit of Yahweh, right? Okay, so I'll start again. The Spirit of Yahweh shall rest upon him. The Spirit of wisdom, the Spirit of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of Yahweh, and shall make him, pronoun, because the name is not mentioned here. And remember, Isaiah is before Yeshua came, so the name would not have been mentioned here. But we know the Spirit. All right? And he shall not judge by the sight of his eyes, nor decide by the hearing of his ears. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and shall decide with straightness for the meek ones of the earth, and shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and slay the wrong with the breath of his lips. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and trustworthiness the girdle of his waist. So without a doubt, we know that that has to be Yeshua. And so if this is not manifested yet, if this is not now happening, then Israel is not in the land, because this is part that tells of that day. The King of Kings will be the king and the ruling reign of the land. If Yeshua is not the king, we're going back to a monarchy. Okay, right now they have what kind of a government? A democracy. So right away you can see the two differences. They're under a democracy, right? Brought on by the UN and all of the European nations, who says this has got to be right. Of the people, for the people, by the people, right? A democratic society. No, we're going back to a monarchy where the king rules and the sons and daughters are of the kingdom. So let me continue on with this, because I'm almost finished and I don't want to slow it down. So let's continue moving on. Chapter 11, verse 6 through 10. And here's a further description of that day, how it should look. And a wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and a leopard lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child leads them, and cow and bear shall feed. Their young ones lie down together, and a lion eats straw like an ox. And the nursing child shall play by the cobra's hole, and the winged child, nursing child, shall put his adder's den, or the snake's den. They, the snakes, do no evil nor destroy in all my set apart mountain. He didn't say anything about any other nation but the mountain that housed Israel. I don't think this is happening yet. For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of Yahweh as water covers the sea. And in that day, somebody say, in that day, there shall be a root of Yeshai, Jesse, standing as a banner to the people. Unto him the Gentiles shall seek, and his rest shall be esteemed. You gotta know that that's Yeshua in his reign, standing as a banner, meaning a flag saying, this way, Israel, this way, come this way, all 12 tribes this way, who have not been back together for over 3,000 years in one place. This is going to be a time to celebrate. So how will the millennial reign look? We're looking at it. Let's continue moving. verses 11 through 16. And it shall be in that day, say it, in that day, that Yahweh sets his hand again a second time to recover the remnant of his people who are left from Asher and from Mizraim and Petros and from Cush and Elam and from Shinar and from Hamath and from the islands, the sea, and he shall raise a banner for the nations and gather the outcasts of Israel and assemble the dispersed of Yehuda. Oh, I thought Yehuda was already there. The tribe of Judah. I thought they were already filling the land. Wait a minute. That's not what it's saying here. From the four corners of the, that's where they are. Some will be there, but not all. From the four corners of the earth, and the envy of Ephraim shall turn aside, and the adversary of Yehuda be cut off. So in other words, even Ephraim and Yehuda will come back together. Ephraim is also Israel. The northern would here is Ephraim, and the southern is Yehuda. So it's still speaking of them in other names. Ephraim shall not envy Yehuda, and Yehuda shall not trouble Ephraim, but they shall fly down upon the shoulder of the Philistines towards the west together. They plunder the people of the east, their hand stretching forth on Edom and Moab, and the children of Ammon shall be subject to them. That's very important right there, because Ammon is on the move. And a lot of the forced migration, Syria, Damascus, all of that is happening. We are seeing this. And Yahweh shall put under the ban the tongue of the sea of Mizraim, Egypt, and he shall wave his hand over the river with the might of his spirit, and shall smite it in 7 streams, and shall cause men to tread it in sandals. And there shall be a highway for the remnant of his people, those left from Asher, the northern kingdom, right? As it was for Israel in the day when he came up from the land of Mizraim. So there's going to be so many people coming from so many directions. He's going to have to bring seven directions together into one. And some of the images that I wanted to show you, I'll get back to that at another time, because I'm looking now at the future. I'm not saying I'm not going to look at anything else, but I think we're seeing some of that starting to happen. For those of you who have been seeing, I wish I had those images, because they were really something to see. But for those of you who have been listening and keeping up, seeing some of the images that are coming out of Kilauea, Hawaii, which is a landmass of the United States, right? Territory of the United States, right? We are seeing some things before our eyes that if we don't start thinking about them, Yahweh is going to say, hey, didn't you see my work? I was doing it all the time. You just didn't know. You didn't understand. But I was working in your behalf. You thought it was just the blessings that was coming on you. But I've been making some highways and byways. I've been getting some things around you. Did you see my tornadoes and things that I had come through those lands and those rivers? Remember that one verse I told you to remember in Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 9, right? Remember how Yahweh, he asked, are you mad at the sea? Are you mad at the storm? Are you? No, I'm not mad at those. It's talking about Yahweh's walking through the sea. And as he walks through the sea, what you see are tornadoes formed and going through, ripping up things. And so Yahweh, he's working And see, we got to experience something right here in Winston-Salem, in our neighborhood. It hasn't happened to us yet. But we were shut down for several hours in the dark. Nobody had lights, and if you were not prepared, you didn't have lights. If you ever been in the pitch black, nothing, no street lights, not very many stars in the sky, it's just dark because the clouds got the sky just smothered and covered. What we saw when I went out to investigate was families and houses and people coming out trying to see, are there street lights? Are there any kind of lights? People saw a light coming from my house and began to ask and say, do you have any more candles? See, I can't take credit for this one. My wife, she's, the studious person that she is. She already had storm candles already waiting. And so we began to pull those storm candles. It was dark. She knew exactly where they were. She began to pull them out from under the cabinet. And I'm trying to stretch my eyes to see what she's doing. She pulled out the liquid and said, go ahead and open this up. She wasn't worried a bit. And she said, pour this in. And I poured it in, and I began to put the wicks, because we can get a little lighter. So we got our little lighter to get the little bit of a flame. And that flame, the darkness departed, did not comprehend. So all of that dark, we were in pitch black. Our home outside, pitch black, dark. We lit that little lighter, and boom, there was light. And I could see what I was doing. And so I began to roll that wick up. My wife gave me the oil, the pouring. My mind was just flooded. My mind was just going. It was racing. I'm like, that's my wife. That's my wife. That's my baby. That's my wife. She was ready. Why? She said, you know what? Sukkot teaches us to be ready. In season and out of season. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. It pays to have a partner to walk through this with. Because you know what? I don't think I would have been ready for that. I would have got that little flashlight, yes. I would have found some candles, because we did have some. Well, I burnt those up, during the wintertime, putting them in the flame, the fire, our little fireplace. But we got through it. And people saw light coming from our house, and they was talking toward us, and I could hear them, but barely see. So I knew, people were reaching out for what? Light. All right, let me get back to this. I don't want to slow down right here. I'm almost finished. A couple more slides and I'm done. All right, so where am I? Okay, so here is the people of Yahweh who are coming back together. Let me prove without a doubt this time has not happened yet. The second bullet, let me just fly through it. Ephraim shall not envy Yehuda, and Yehuda not trouble Ephraim, but they shall fly down upon the shoulder of the Philistines toward. So yes, there's still going to be an issue between the Philistines or the Philistines and Israel. Towards the west together, plundered the people of the east. Their hand trenched forth of Edom and Moab, and the children of Ammon shall be subject to them. And remember where it says, what you have done will be done to you. Proof of a people who now become the authority. What you have done will be done. So if enslavement have been done, enslavement will be done. What you have done will come back on your own head. That's not happened yet. And did you get the different names going back up to the top bullet? People who are left over from Asher, Misraim, Petros, Cush, Elam, Shinar. Those are dark-skinned people. And so they are being named. Why? Because anyone who's over in the land don't recognize that these are the people of the land. right? All right, so let me move on from here. One more after this. So, chapter 12, Isaiah chapter 12, verse 1 through 6. And in that day, say it. Hallelujah. In that day, this is how it's going to look. You shall say, I thank you, Yahweh, though you were enraged with me, Israel. Your displeasure has turned back, and you have comforted me. CL is my deliverance. I trust and am not afraid. For Yahweh is my strength and my song. Remember the song of Moses? It has not been sung yet. And he shall become my deliverance. And you shall draw water with joy from the fountain of deliverance. And in that day, say it. Hallelujah. I need a little more than that. Come on. In that day. You shall say, praise Yahweh, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the peoples. Make mention that his name is exalted. Sing to Yahweh, for he has done excellently. This is known in all the earth. Cry aloud and shout, O inhabitants of Zion, for great is the set-apart one of Israel in your midst. This is not done yet. Now, if they say, well, it's been done before, no, we're talking about an everlasting kingdom, not one that ends. So this has not been fulfilled. We're talking about an everlasting king, an everlasting Yahweh. So Zechariah, my last slide, Zechariah chapter 13, verse 1 and 2. In that day, come on with me, in that day, a fountain shall be opened for the house of David and for the inhabitants of Jerusalem for sin and uncleanness. Remember that water, sprinkling of water? Remember I spoke about that already? Right? Here it is again. Here it is. And it shall be in that day. Come on with me. In that day. In that day. Declares Yahweh of hosts that I cut off the names of the idols. Have not been done yet. Because they got all kind of idols over there. From the earth. Not just Jerusalem, but from the earth. This has not been fulfilled. If there's any inkling of a doubt, this has not been fulfilled. And it shall be in that day, declares Yahweh of hosts, that I cut off the names of the idols from the earth, and they shall be remembered no more, and I shall remove the prophets and the unclean spirits from the earth. I told y'all before, there's coming a time where people will no longer say, I am a prophet. We are not there. He says, this is his word. And I shall remove the prophets. Now, that's not talking about his prophets. He says the prophets and their unclean spirits. So there's coming a time that will be fulfilled when even the parents of one who calls himself a prophet will run him through, will spear him because he prophesied and the prophecy didn't come true. They will then begin to say, I am no prophet. Aren't you a prophet? I am no prophet. I'm a farmer who was sold into slavery. They will then begin to say, no, Why? Because Yahweh's people, those who are coming forward, how will you know them? How will you know Yahweh's prophet and man's prophets? Well, here's a good look. Man's prophet spelled differently with an I-T. They're for a profit, for a hire. They're hirelings. Their desire is to be fed by their own strength. And so they preach, teach, whatever they're doing, healing, all these things to get paid. And some of them will not come to your edifice without a certain certain price. And during Yeshua's time, he said, "Don't take no payment, take no money for your journey, because when you go, they will give you, because my spirit will be in you. They will give to you." That's how you tell the difference between the two. And if they say we're no longer under law, dead giveaway. So cutting off the names of the idols from the earth, removing the prophets and all unclean spirits, not fulfilled yet. Therefore, we are not in that time. But we're coming to it. I was getting there, and I think I sidestepped looking at Mount Kilauea and the different volcanoes that are happening. Those images is just splendid to look at. Looking at what Yahweh is doing. Is he paving a road? I'm not saying it's going all the way, but I think if we think hard enough about his scriptures and begin to look at some of these things that are happening, Kilauea, there's a new road and pavement that's taking place. And you look at the highways and the different things that's taking place, and they're on fire. Revelation says, "And I shall toss the mountains into the rivers." And that was one of them that I wanted to show you, how the mountain is spewing out fire, and the liquid fire is going into the water, into the sea. And you see this big old fiery mountain coming up out of the sea. It's pure fire. And the mountains shall be cast into the sea. Two ways, literally and figuratively. The sea as the people, the sea as the water, the fishes. And I used that correctly. Fishes, species, people, groups of people. So we're seeing Yahweh's word being fulfilled, and he's doing it. He's doing exactly what I never could have imagined how this would happen, but we're seeing him delivering us. See, Moses saw it long before, because he said, "You have begun to show your strength and power." And that was before they even got into the promised land. And so I'm not going to wait till we get in the promised land to recognize some things that he's doing. And when he steps in the sea and tornadoes form and hurricanes form and these massive storms come through, knocking out people's lives. But he knows how to judge areas and people, and his people still be part of the judgment, but they're being saved inside of the judgment. And so we will have a testimony. Can we give Yahweh a praise? Hallelujah.
We praise you, King of glory. We praise you, Prince of Peace. We lift our voice to